And so if you're in the valley in your life, know that you too will come out whole again. You too will come out better. You too will come out knowing that you are supported beyond belief, that you are loved beyond belief, and you are absolutely never alone. Good morning, Celebration Spiritual Center. How are you feeling? How are you being? Thank you, Soul 21. Thank you, Soul 21. Yes. I want to get right in because I do have a few things to discuss today. We are in our series, Stay Woke. Last week, we started with the topic, Always Innocent. As we're using the life and teachings of Yogananda, I wanted to start with looking at his childhood. I think what's so interesting and what I shared there in last week is that we look at people that we revere and we look up to, and we want to see, was their brilliance even when they were 5? Was there some inkling that, they were going to be great? And so even in our country, as I talked about, as George Washington is considered the father of our country, we have the story that we learn as children about the cherry tree, and I cannot tell a lie, because there's this desire to put those that we've placed in this lofty position to see that they were always great, even as children. And I also shared that in the Gnostic text, we find the infancy gospels that give us more of a picture of the life of Jesus. And we find that little Jesus was doing wonderful things, even as a little boy. And so then we looked at the life of Yogananda, and we find that even in his life, at a young age, at about 8 years old, he was already doing things that we would call miracles. But in truth, he understood his connection with this thing that we call God. He understood this source, and so he was able to demonstrate that, although he did not have full knowledge or full expression of that at that time. If you didn't see that message, please go to YouTube or the New Thought channel, and you can check that out. I want to move on into where we're going today, and I thought that I was going to continue to talk about Yogananda's childhood, because there's a scene from his life that I absolutely love, and I thought I was going to talk about that today, but then we experienced the massacre, the shooting in Las Vegas. And interestingly enough, that day, October 2nd, is also the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi. And I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about Gandhi, because what's interesting is that if you read Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda dedicates an entire chapter to him and Gandhi, because they were contemporaries and actually spent some time together. Yogananda talks about when he went back to India after having spent so much time in the United States. He was called back to India, and he talks about all of the different people that he meets, but he dedicates an entire chapter, I believe it's chapter 44, to his time with Gandhi in 1935. And so I recognized that it was time to go to this section and to deal with this, because as we think about Gandhi, the painful irony that this man who brings us the teachings of nonviolence, we have this incredible experience of violence in our country. And so I want to talk a little bit about nonviolence today, but what I really want to do is speak to what I've been seeing and hearing and where people are and what people are feeling as a result of what's taken place. And so that's where the topic came from, right? So we prayed, now what? Right? Because there's a call and there's a desire that praying is not enough, right? That we as spiritual people, although we pray and we understand the power of prayer, that didn't keep this gentleman from doing what he did. That hasn't stopped the violence and the murder and the killings that unfortunately has become an intricate part of the history of this country. Yes, yes? And so what I want to do is speak to 3 audiences today. Now, you may find yourself, you might have one foot in each of these buckets, right? You might be in one audience or another. You might not be in any. But first, we're going to talk to the cynics. Then we're going to talk to the heavenly minded. And then we're going to talk to what I want to call the yes, yes crowd. So first, let's speak to the cynics. Now, the cynics are the ones that are saying, I'm so tired of hearing about thoughts and prayers. Right? We have a bunch of congressmen and women who sent out thoughts and prayers, and yet they voted against gun control and gun reform. I'm so sick of hearing about thoughts and prayers. Yes, yes? Thoughts and prayers are meaningless when you had the power to vote, to change the situation so that automatic rifles and militarized weapons cannot get in the hands of lay people. Yes, yes? And so I recognize and I hear the voice of the cynics. I understand why they're so sick of hearing about thoughts and prayers. But first, I want us to also understand what prayer really is. Because there are a lot of people, even lay people, who are saying, oh, my thoughts and prayers, I'm sending out thoughts and prayers. When something happens in someone's life and immediately, oh, sending love and light, thoughts and prayers to you. Meanwhile, you don't actually pray, right? It just becomes a trite phrase that we use, that we've been trained and habituated into using. Now, the first thing is to understand what prayer is. Prayer, true prayer, is not hoping, it's not begging, and it's not wishing, right? When we hope, what we're really doing is praying and worrying at the same time, right? And so we recognize that what we understand and we teach here with a new thought is that prayer, affirmative prayer, is knowing what is true, is bringing our minds back to what is true, bringing our minds back to the truth of our unity, bringing our minds back to the truth that we are all is well, that bringing our minds back to the truth that there's an unconditionally loving presence that loves us now, and it does not desire the experience that we're experiencing, but we recognize that if anyone is choosing to murder and kill many people or hundreds of people, we recognize that they are not in their right mind. They do not remember the truth of our oneness. They have not remembered the truth of their own worthiness. They do not know the truth that God dwells within them. And so if I'm seeing that expressed in the life of my brother or sister, that means it lives within our consciousness. And so we need to shift our consciousness back to what is true. That's what prayer does. True prayer. Now, if you don't know about true prayer, please, you can go back to the message I gave a few years ago. Prayer is your superpower. And then I also gave another message, True Prayer, where we outline the 5 steps of affirmative prayer. We're also teaching a class this month on the 22nd, an intro to affirmative prayer, to understand and learn that even if we say thoughts and prayers, or I'm sending you prayers, then we're actually going to use this superpower of prayer to first shift our own experience, right, to get us into a place where we can be helpful. Because if we're also in a place of fear, then we can't be helpful to our brothers or sisters, right? Those families that are now in mourning, right, who need our love and support, they really do need our thoughts and prayers. But if we're in a place of fear and worry, we can't be a loving presence to them as they need us to be in this moment of mourning. Yes, yes? So even as we send out thoughts and prayers, we got to use thoughts and prayer to get ourselves together first. Yes, yes? Then we can be a beneficial presence on the planet. So to the cynics, again, I hear you. I'm right there with you. Our congressfolk have a responsibility. We put them in office to reflect what it is that we truly desire as a people. And so we need to call them on it, right? We need to write letters, right? We need to make phone calls to let them know what it is that we desire. If you look at the polls, the American people overwhelmingly actually are in favor of the most practical measures as it relates to gun control, right? That someone who is documented with mental illness cannot get a gun, right? If someone that is already not allowed to get on a plane because of their history, right, terrorist history, then why should they be allowed to get a gun? It's really practical, right? And so I'm completely in agreement with the cynics in that sense, that we need to speak to our congressfolk and call on them to bring forth change. And so inasmuch as they're tweeting thoughts and prayers, we know the truth, that they, one, are not fully understanding true prayer, and they are simply operating out of habit. Now we have our second crowd, the heavenly minded. Might be my favorite crowd. Now, the heavenly minded, I think the heavenly minded group kind of lives in two different camps, right? One camp of the heavenly minded are the folks that are so woke that they know, oh, this is all an illusion. Life is just an illusion, and so I don't have to pay any attention to it because you're so woke. I don't have to do anything. It's all an illusion. It doesn't matter. It's the Matrix. So they bury their heads in the sand. They don't even address anything, right? They don't make any attempt to be love on the planet in any way. Now, the other side of the heavenly minded is the folks that live in woo-woo land. Those are the folks that are just, oh, we're all one, and I just love everybody, and, life is just wonderful, and I don't understand why people can't just get along, right? But they're just living in woo-woo land, right? Again, there's no action that's happening, right? They're just affirming woo-woo, right? Which is wonderful, and it feels good to live in woo-woo land. Yes, we've all lived in woo-woo land. It feels good to live in woo-woo land. The problem is that woo-woo land doesn't change our laws. Living in woo-woo land does not bring people together. Living in woo-woo land does not do the things that Mahatma Gandhi was able to do on this planet. Woo-woo land does not do the things that, inspired by Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King was able to do on this planet. And so what I also recognize then for my brothers and sisters that are woke, my brothers and sisters that understand that life is an illusion, well, to my brothers and sisters, I also say that you understand that life is a mirror. And if you understand that life is a mirror, then you recognize that there is a collective consciousness that is being enacted and that we're seeing played out on the planet. And so if you're woke and you know that life is an illusion and you know that life is a mirror, then there's a recognition that wherever I'm seeing anything that is the opposite of love, it is a call for love. That's if you're woke. The heavenly minded actually understand this. And when you understand that, then that means that it's a call for two things. A call for love on a collective level, right? Because we recognize that we have a shared consciousness, that things can't happen out here in the world unless it also exists within, right? And so that means that we have to go within and change some thoughts and ideas. And the only way to do that is on the individual level. So it's easy to talk about how this brother who killed all of these people, obviously in hate and separation and fear, and I just don't understand. How could you do that? How could you kill all of these people? But then we have to come to ourselves and say, well, where am I operating in separation in my own life? Where am I not willing to be in community with people that don't look like me? Where have I been unwilling to have dialogues with people that don't think like me? Because it's the same energy. And so we're watching that consciousness being played out on a larger scale to get our attention so we can see it. That's what's happening in the world. We talk about it so often, the still small voice is still and small until you keep ignoring it. And as the more and more you ignore it, it turns out to be a brick upside your head. And so we recognize from the level of consciousness, we have to ask ourselves, if we're woke, if we understand how powerful we are, that this is an illusion, which means we can manipulate it, then we have to ask ourselves, what changes do we need to make within ourselves so that we can see something different out here in the world? What's also interesting to me when we think about this idea of our collective consciousness and the mirror, we have a very unique issue here in the United States. And this came up last month. We had the God Talk, and we used that forum to look at racism and injustice in our country and use new thought principles, metaphysical principles to discuss it. And one of the ideas that came up as we were looking at particularly the idea that unarmed black men are being killed, I don't want to say every day, but are being killed in this country at an alarming rate. If you look also outside of this country, there's a statistic that just came out of Brazil. I was in a meeting with some activists there from Brazil. In the favelas of Brazil, black boys are being killed every 11 minutes by the cops, right? But what we recognize in this country, as we can look at that statistic and we can focus on the fact that unarmed black men are being killed, that is simply a system of this larger issue that the United States has with gun violence and murder. Our murder rate overall is alarming compared to every other so-called civilized nation on this planet. We have a problem. There's a statistic, and I shared this on Facebook, but there's a statistic about gun ownership, civilian guns owned in this country. America, we represent 4.4% of the population on this planet. But yet, Americans own 44% of the civilian-owned guns on this planet. We have a very unique issue in this country. And again, this speaks to the consciousness. What's even more interesting, and I'll make sure that we share these statistics in this article because it was great. It also talks about even with suicide, that we can look at the stats and see that the states that have enacted certain measures of gun control, the suicide rate has gone down. Now, why is that? Well, because unfortunately, suicide by gun is 94% successful. Any other mode, cutting, it's about 5%. Poisoning, it's under 10%. A gun is unforgiving. And so what's so interesting is that as we minimize the amount of guns, people who in that moment of desperation, in that moment, and we have all, I'm sure, at the very least, wished we wouldn't wake up the next day because life was so bad, right? I share the story of my life and being homeless and having experienced so many things in my own life. And yes, in those moments, I didn't want to kill myself, but if I just didn't wake up, that would have eased the pain. I no longer would have had to deal with that problem. And so we recognize that every human being has had some experience, something close to, if not completely wanting to end your life. And we recognize that for many of us who are in this space, you're here now. You made a different choice. You made a different decision. But what if some of our brothers and sisters just didn't have access to the gun because our laws wouldn't have been able to put it in their hands? They would be here today. They would have been able in time to recognize this truth that behind it all there's a master plan, that there's something bigger going on, that there is purpose to my life, that I am actually worthy, that I'm not my mistakes, that what's going on right now doesn't define me, that I will grow through this, that I will overcome this situation, right? We have a unique problem in this country, which reflects our own consciousness. And so we have this beautiful opportunity to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, where do I, on an individual level, where's the call for love for myself? What are the places within me that I need to heal that represent fear and separation and othering and otherness? Where do I need to heal that? Because I know the truth, there's only one race. Did y'all know that? We are 99.99999% alike on the DNA level. Race was a construct that was created to separate us. We're just humans. We're all brothers and sisters, one family. But because we've been educated in this society and in this country, we may not always remember that. Because there are so many things that try to separate us. If we've evolved beyond race, right? You might not know that your LGBTIQ brothers and sisters are your brothers and sisters. You might not have evolved past that yet, right? If you've moved through that place, you might find that you even might shame people or other someone for their weight, right? What they look like in another way, right? All of us are complicit in that sense. Because again, it's a national consciousness that must be healed. We got to look within ourselves. Because we're one body, right? And so you recognize if you hurt your foot, that kind of colors the experience of your entire day and your entire body, right? So that means that on that individual level of the foot, you want to make sure you heal that. And what happens? When you change the experience of the pain in your foot, your entire body gets happy. And your entire day, the way your day plays out, shifts. Yes, yes? So this is why it's important that we look at this from the individual level, recognizing that on that individual level, we actually affect the entire body, the entire nation, our entire experience. So finally, we have the yes, yes crowd. And when I say the yes, yes crowd, we know here at CSC, we say yes, yes all the time. Yes, yes is like amen. We say yes, yes to the truth, right? And so I believe that the yes, yes crowd is everybody here in the room. And what I want to offer to you, the yes, yes crowd, is that our spirituality must be the catalyst for our action. When we look at the life of Mahatma Gandhi, When we look at the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, what it's important to me and what I believe that has been lost as we admonish those movements is that they were inherently spiritual movements. If you look at the chapter where Yogananda is talking about his experience and his time that he spent with Mahatma Gandhi, one of the things that Gandhi did every day on Monday was his day of silence. He would just use that time as a time of silence. He would still interact with people. He would write down what he had to say. He said initially what he did, why he started that, was because it gave him time to catch up with his correspondence and doing the writing that he needed to do. But then he understood it to be a spiritual practice and something that he needed in order to be great out on the planet. Now, not only that, through these teachings of nonviolence, an ashram was founded. And so there were other devotees and folks that were living in community together, spiritual community, and they were praying together, and they were reading and studying the Bhagavad Gita together. And it was out of that this principle of nonviolence comes, and it's out of that was the energy. That was the catalyst that then gave birth to the millions and millions of people that came together to then push out the British. Similarly, we look at Dr. King, who was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. This was a spiritual movement, not just because he was a preacher, but because nonviolence is based on the law of love, which is a spiritual idea when you understand it. When you understand that even in the face of fear, even in the face of othering, even in the face of violence, even in the face of destruction, even in the face of someone who sees me as less than human, the love that I express will conquer that. The love that I express will be victorious over that. The love that I express will ripple out across this planet and change laws and change experience and change hearts and change minds. When we look at the principle of nonviolence, and this is something that I had some trouble with for a long time. If you read the principles of nonviolence as it's articulated by Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the things that it says is that there's a belief that there's a redemptive quality in unearned suffering. And I had a problem with that because I don't believe that we have to suffer in any way. But what I understand, the heart of what's being said there is this idea that when you truly understand what love is and what love does, and we look at what took place in the 60s, people's hearts and minds were changed by witnessing this unearned suffering. And so the redemptive quality was that it began to mobilize more people. Right? We understand, if you know the history, you know Freedom Summer, and you know what happened. More people, all of a sudden, white college students started coming down and standing with their brothers and sisters, and people from other faiths began to come together and stand with their brothers and sisters. And those who were ministers, who were not speaking out against what was going on, all of a sudden their hearts were pricked. All of a sudden their minds were changed because they recognized, how can I speak about this man named Jesus? How can I speak about this man that says the greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself? And I'm standing here on the sidelines. I must be here with my brothers and sisters and demonstrate what love is, what love looks like, what unity is, what unity looks like. And so through practicing this beautiful spiritual idea of nonviolence, which again, it is a spiritual principle. Mahatma Gandhi was clear about that. Dr. Martin Luther King was clear about that. That is how we can then transform the world. A Course in Miracles, what does it say? Every act of fear is a call for love. So then we ask ourselves, how and why can we bring love? I want to close with this. We shared in the announcements about transcendental meditation, and again, you can come stay this afternoon to learn more about the technique. But I wanted to talk about why I learned, because that has everything to do with this idea. So we prayed, so now what? Now for me, it was back in 2006. How many people have seen the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? Yeah, right. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, go catch it. I think it's on Netflix right now. I saw that movie and I was introduced to a gentleman through that movie, Dr. John Hagelin. Awesome man, right? Awesome man. And it was through listening to him that I began to look into more of what he was all about. And I learned about transcendental meditation. And what was important to me and what really grabbed me was to see the research on what transcendental meditation could do on a planetary level. I began to read the studies, and I shared this in the message Illusions End back in August of 2014. Reading about the study in, it was 93, I believe, 93 or 94, the study in Washington, D.C. Now, for me, having grown up in the D.C. area, grown up outside of Silver Spring, or in Silver Spring, Maryland, outside of D.C., I knew about the violence that was taking place in D.C., right? This was the height of the crack epidemic. As I talked about in that message, unfortunately, it was so bad that the mayor of D.C. was even caught smoking crack, right? D.C. was known and called the murder capital. And my church that I love, that I grew up in, is in D.C., and so, you were kind of fearful at night. You didn't want to be out late at night in D.C., right? And so to hear that thousands of meditators could come together and could reduce the violence in the summer. Now, we also know, statistics teach us that summer violence is always heightened, right? People are on edge. Y'all seen Do the Right Thing, right? And so this was a daunting task to affirm and claim that violence would be able to be reduced. And not only that, other measures were looked at, that less people would go check in the hospitals, right? And all of these different measures to see that well-being was happening within the city. And once the group of meditators reached a critical mass, which is scientifically you have to reach this critical mass, you can see the clear drop by 23% of violence in the city. Now, this type of experiment has been repeated over and over again across this planet, not just with our local violence, but even with war, even with bombs and missiles. And that was something that stuck with me. I'm like, meditation can do this. Wow. And I put it on my bucket list. One day I'll learn that TM thing. Right? Many years went by, and since we have opened the doors of CSC, we've had many challenges in this country, right? We had Trayvon Martin was killed, and Michael Brown, and Eric Garner, and so this message in 2014, Illusions End, was after Michael Brown was killed, and in that message, I shared this same study. I talked about it. We have the power to do something spiritual, that we can use this tool, this non-physical tool of meditation, and make changes. Now, while I was talking about it, I wasn't practicing it. And so last year, I just felt like we just got hit with, just too many punches, right? There was the Pulse nightclub shooting. And then Alton Sterling and Philando Castile were killed. And I found myself very troubled, but I also found myself optimistic because I knew and knew that there's a possibility to change the world through consciousness. But I said to myself, I cannot stand as a pastor before this congregation and keep talking about what you can do if I'm not doing it myself. Pastor Yolanda and I always say, don't do what we say, do as we do. And so I told Pastor Yolanda, I said, I'm going to the TM intro technique. You can come if you want to, but I got to do this. Because I recognize we're in a critical point right now in this country. And I recognize as surely as I know this is true, I don't even have to believe it's true. I know it's true. The numbers don't lie, and it's been repeated over and over and over again, this technology of peace. I must be a part of the solution. This is part of my sacred activism. And I recognize then that as I go within, what's beautiful and you learn through TM is that as you go within and you come out, you bring with that the full support of life, the full support of all of life. And so then from there, inspired action will come. From there, inspired ideas will come, new ideas. Because the other thing that's happening right now is we're trying to do the same thing, repeating what worked in 1955. 1955 and 2017 are two different realities. We can't do what happened then. The reason why it worked then is because it was a new idea. It challenged, no one had ever seen it before in that way. Which means that we have to bring new ideas. But unless we're tapping into the realm of all ideas, there's no way we're going to get to new ideas. So last summer, in the midst of all of that turmoil, I said, I got to learn this technique. And I did. We both did in August of last summer. And of course, after we learned, after when we went to the intro session, that first intro session, we were like, okay, we're learning how do we get y'all at CSC? We need y'all at CSC like ASAP, next month. Can you come next week? We were very clear. And it was actually last year this time, October of last year, was the first intro session that we were able to have here. And I'm so grateful to know that many of you have learned. Now, what's beautiful, what I love about this idea of TM as what I call a divine idea is because what it does. Now, as we're talking about the fact that through meditating 20 minutes twice a day, what you're doing, it's like being in a pool. And what's interesting, if I'm on one end of the pool and you're on another end of the pool, but I begin to trouble the water, those waves will meet you. Yes, yes? Well, that's what happens through TM. That by tapping into consciousness, the realm of all ideas, this realm that is love itself, this realm that is peace itself, I begin to trouble the water, and those waves begin to ripple out. They ripple out in your home. Pastor Yolanda and I, our home is so peaceful. I hesitate. Y'all know 4 T's. I can't use the weird word. I can't use that word, right? I can't use that word. It's amazing. It's awesome to feel that peace that just is, because we live next to a very busy street. Bedford Avenue, there's always sound, there's always noise, there's all these things going on. But that has just subsided. There's just a peace. There's just a calm. And you take that peace out in the world with you. And so you bring that same peace and that same calm into your workplace. You bring that same peace, that same calm to the subway. You bring that same peace and that same calm to Thanksgiving dinner in November. Everywhere you go. But what's so interesting to me as we have this larger idea, and for me, that was really the thing. It was about being a part of this technology of peace and really beaming peace out into the world, because I know that we will change our planet as more and more meditators come online. I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. But what's so interesting is that a divine idea has to be something that gives to the world and gives to you simultaneously without either running out. And so what's so beautiful is that by you choosing to meditate 20 minutes twice a day, you're giving to yourself something so profound. Because the research also shows that your biological age lowers as a result of meditating. I love meeting meditators that are in their 60s because I can't tell how old they are. You also begin to heal your body as you reduce the stress within your body, which, again, we know that stress is the root cause of the top 10 leading causes of death in this country. We know that, right? So as you release and reduce stress in your body, then your heart problems start to minimize. This is why you lower blood pressure. This is why you reduce your cholesterol levels. Because it is the body's natural state to heal itself. Well-being is natural. Well-being is normal. Well-being is automatic. But we have to have something, a tool that allows us to tap back into it. So even as you are choosing, if you're choosing, because you recognize you're a light worker, you recognize that you're part of the yes, yes crowd, you recognize that you want your spirituality to be a catalyst for your action, even as you are choosing to heal the world through meditation, you will heal yourself. That's a divine idea right there. That's a God idea. And that's the nature of consciousness itself. Consciousness never exhausts itself. We've talked about this so often. The word Lord that we read in the Bible, that word Jehovah is the self-existing one, which means that from itself, it can give of itself and never loses anything and continues to replenish itself. In mathematics, we actually have a mathematical formula that proves this theory, that consciousness itself, it gives of itself and keeps giving back to itself and never runs out. And so you similarly do the very same thing. It's the plane of correspondence, the macro and the micro. So on your micro level, as you give of yourself 20 minutes twice a day, you're also giving back to yourself, never losing anything, but gaining the full support of life, as Maharishi would say. And so I invite you to ask yourselves these questions. What is the highest possible idea that I can implement or be a part of? Where can I be the God experience? Where can I be the love experience? Where can I be the joy experience? Where can I be the peace experience? There are so many different opportunities and ways to do it. Please don't take my word for it. I've shared this book before. I'll share it again. Permanent Peace by Robert Oates. It outlines all of these major studies, and it outlines the physics and the mathematics behind it. Again, you can know that this is true. You don't have to believe it. We're in the age of I know. We keep talking about this. We're in the age of knowing, not in the age of believing anymore. That time has gone. The math doesn't lie. The science doesn't lie. If it's not TM, then go within yourself and ask these questions. What is the highest possible idea for me? This is what Pastor Yolanda and I did as we were looking and seeing what was going on in Puerto Rico. We could have just acted out of our limited imagination, but we waited for the divine idea, not knowing what was already taking place. That Reverend Jennifer and George were already moving in a certain direction. He owns a UPS store. He understands shipping and has access to those things. So he asked, what is the highest idea? I know about shipping. So let me see what I can do from this place of knowing. Well, we're pastors and we know how to mobilize people. So now we can mobilize people and come together. And then on top of that, what has happened? The city of South Orange has donated an abandoned store because there's so much items that are being collected and being donated that there was more space that's needed. That was something that the city could do from the highest place, from the highest idea. And then this coming, or next Tuesday, after we deliver everything on next Saturday, then there are moving trucks that have donated their services to take everything to the docks to put it on the ships. This is what happens when each of us operate from this place of what is the highest idea of what we can do. And I guarantee you, it's always going to be something that's easy, something that you already know about, something that you already know how to do, not something that you got to get training for, not something that you got to watch tutorials on, but something that you already know how to do. And you find joy in doing it. And so as we're still in mourning and sending our love and truly praying for our brothers and sisters in Vegas, let us ask ourselves these questions so that we can be a beneficial presence on this earth, so that we can be the example of peace, so that we can be the king, so that we can be the Gandhi, so that we can be the guru on this planet. Because that's what it's about right now. Self-realization is not about waiting on some guru or teacher to anoint you and say you're great or you have the power now. That's not it. This age, this time that we're in, is for each of us to recognize that we have the power. So then we become like the Avengers. Right? Where all of these amazing superheroes come together. Then you become like the Justice League, where amazing superheroes, all of them can do amazing things on their own when you come together and multiply that power. When you come together and work together and multiply that power. What a world, what a world, what a world we will create. And how will we change this world? Each and every one of us are superheroes. With that, I invite everybody to stand. I invite you to stand. Oh, I am so grateful and thankful for each and every one of you. I am so grateful to know your power, to experience your power, to experience your love, to experience your joy. And I know that this love, this joy, this peace that you are, it is rippling out across this nation and across this planet. At the level of consciousness, just as you can, without seeing a person, can feel their energy in a room, that's the level that we're affecting change. We had the awesome opportunity to listen to Bob Roth, who's the executive director of the David Lynch Foundation. The David Lynch Foundation is teaching TM to students across the country. They're also teaching TM to women who have experienced domestic violence, and the children of families that have experienced domestic violence. They're also teaching TM to our military veterans who are moving through PTSD, right? Very necessary. But one of the things that he shared is that what's happening right now in Washington, D.C. is that Bob Roth has personally taught many of our congressfolk on both sides of the aisle this TM technique, this technology of peace. Now, what's also interesting, as we said, that this technology has the power to shift and change the atmosphere in the community. There is now a plan in place, and money has been put in place to ensure that all of the schools in the District of Columbia, all of those children will be meditating every day and learn this technique. So what that means is this vibration of love, this vibration of peace will be rippling to the White House. That means that this vibration of love, this vibration of peace will be rippling all throughout the Capitol. So that means that even if they don't understand why, they will begin to change their minds about certain ways that they voted. Even if they don't understand why, their hearts will begin to turn, their hearts will begin to change, and they will begin to write laws and write new legislation that are affirmative, that bring us all together, that are life-supporting. And so know that there are things happening at the level of consciousness. Please do not be dismayed by what we're seeing. One story that's being told on the news. There's another reality. There's another story that's also being told, that's also happening. And know that you individually are playing a part in that larger story of love. So right here and now, Mother, Father, God, we are grateful to know that love itself lives within us. Right here and right now, we are grateful to know that peace lives within us. Right here and right now, we are grateful to remember and know that we are more than physical beings. But we have a non-physical self that is more powerful than anything that our physical self can do. And so from that awareness, we now turn our hearts and our minds to this greatest part of us. And we ask the question, what is the highest possible idea of what I can do and be on this planet as a causer of love? How can I be the God experience on this planet? Love within me, God within me, peace within me. How can we be peace on this planet? Joy within me. How can I be the joy experience on this planet? And we are willing and ready to wait and listen. We listen for the voice of truth. We listen for the voice of spirit. And from that listening, we use that energy to move out into the world. Inspired by our spirituality, not living in woo-woo land of spirituality, but now inspired by our spirituality, not just talking about being woke, but demonstrating what woke looks like. I am so grateful and thankful for the souls in this room. For I know that as each and every one of you are superheroes with superpowers, I am grateful and thankful to be a witness to how you use your superpower to empower, to inspire, to change lives. And by changing our lives, we change this planet. For this, I am so very grateful. I release this prayer now, and together we say amen, amen. Ashe. And so it is. And so it is.